The Galactic Coalition surrounded Earth in silence. The black void beyond the planet was filled with thousands of alien warships, their silver hulls reflecting the faint blue glow of the atmosphere. The blockade stretched from horizon to horizon like a steel cage. Every major species in the Coalition had sent ships, each believing this was the final step in ending the defiance of humanity. They thought Earth would surrender once it realized there was no escape. But deep below the planet's surface, people were not afraid. They were waiting. General Ethan Ward stood in the underground command center beneath what was once Colorado Springs. The air was tense, the lights dim, and the screens above him displayed endless streams of alien fleet movements. Yet he was calm. His team waited for his order, but he gave none. Outside, the world was silent. The alien armada expected retaliation, but it never came. The Coalition's commanders believed humanity was cornered, weak and desperate. They were wrong. Dr. Natalie Brooks sat inside a reinforced research complex under the Arctic Circle. She had worked there for 10 years on a project that almost no one in the galaxy knew existed. The Coalition thought they had learned everything about human science after decades of observation, but what Natalie and her team had built was far beyond their understanding. It was called Horizon. It was not a weapon, it was a door. The large chamber around her was filled with humming generators and a massive ring of polished metal lined with faintly glowing circuits. It was quiet but powerful, like a sleeping storm. Natalie watched as the energy readings rose on her monitor. Everything was ready. The last piece of the plan was now in motion. Far above Earth, the alien fleets moved closer. Admiral Kareth of the Thal Re fleet stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, gazing at the blue planet below. His scaled fingers tapped against the arm of his command chair. To him, humanity had been a nuisance for centuries, a primitive race that refused to accept its place among the stars. They were clever, yes, but too emotional, too unpredictable. The Coalition had offered them treaties and control, but they always pushed back. Now Kareth believed it would finally end. His orders were clear. Surround the planet, demand surrender. Destroy resistance if necessary. He smiled as he watched the holographic map showing his ships forming a complete ring around the solar system. There was nowhere left for humans to run. On the surface, people continued to live as though nothing was happening. The news channels had stopped broadcasting weeks ago. The networks were gone, yet no one panicked. The cities were mostly empty now. Entire populations had vanished from major regions. The Coalition had noticed but assumed it was due to fear or internal collapse. They were wrong again. Humanity was not hiding. They were leaving. In the command room, Ethan received a message from Natalie. The message was short. "We are ready." That was all he needed. He looked at the young officer beside him, a man barely 20. "Send the code," Ethan said quietly. The officer nodded and pressed a single key on the console. A faint tremor ran through the ground as the signal traveled across the planet. Deep within the Arctic facility, the Horizon Gate came alive. Rings of blue light spun faster and faster until the air inside the device shimmered and folded like glass under pressure. The hum became a roar and then silence. The gate had opened. All around the world, in secret locations built over decades, similar gates activated. Some were under mountains, others hidden beneath oceans or buried beneath deserts. For years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. The Coalition believed they were watching every step of human progress, but they had been blinded by their arrogance. The humans had built their greatest creation in places no alien would think to look, and now, one by one, entire cities vanished as the gates drew them through to distant systems. Ethan watched as reports came in. The cities of New York, Tokyo, and Berlin were gone. The last ships had departed orbit. Every major facility had transmitted its final coordinates and gone silent. It was happening faster than he expected. He stood quietly, feeling a strange mix of pride and sorrow. Earth had always been home, but now it was becoming something else, a memory. In space, Admiral Kareth's sensors began to flicker. His officers reported strange readings from the planet: energy spikes, gravitational distortions, communication interference. He ordered scans, but the results made no sense. Power levels far beyond known technology were appearing across the surface. It looked like the planet was tearing itself apart. Kareth's eyes widened as he realized the humans were not surrendering. They were doing something impossible. "Prepare weapons," he ordered. "Destroy their power sources." But before the command could be carried out, the readings spiked again. Earth's magnetic field surged outward with tremendous force, washing over the alien ships. Systems failed. Engines stalled. Communications collapsed. For a few minutes, every ship in the blockade was blind. When the interference cleared, Earth looked the same, but something was different. There were no transmissions, no power signatures, no movement. The entire planet had gone dark. Kareth ordered ground scans again, but the sensors found almost nothing. Population 0. No sign of human life anywhere. "Where did they go?" he whispered. His second officer, a tall insectoid being, clicked its mandibles nervously. "Evacuated, perhaps," it said. Kareth shook his head. "To where?" he asked. But deep inside, he already knew the answer. The humans had always done the unthinkable. They had found a way to escape the cage he built. Back in the Arctic facility, Natalie stood alone. The gate before her was still glowing faintly, its energy nearly spent. Everyone else had already gone through. She looked around the empty room and smiled. The air was cold, her breath forming soft clouds in the dim light. She touched the console and whispered, "Goodbye." Then she stepped into the light and vanished. The gate closed with a soft hum, leaving only silence. In the command center, Ethan watched the final transmission fade. He turned to his officers. "It's time," he said. He walked to the large window and looked toward the surface above, though he could not see it from underground. "They think they trapped us," he murmured. "Let them believe that." Moments later, he activated the final sequence. The base shook as the last gate opened beneath it. In seconds, the entire facility dissolved into light and disappeared. When Admiral Kareth's fleet regained full control, there was nothing left to attack. Earth was empty, quiet, and lifeless. The once bright cities were dark. The oceans still shimmered, but they were untouched. It was as if the planet had gone to sleep. Kareth stared in disbelief. He had surrounded humanity's cradle, only to find it abandoned. He had not won a war. He had been left behind. And somewhere beyond the stars, humanity had already begun again. The stars around the solar system burned quietly as the alien fleets remained in formation. They had surrounded Earth with full confidence that victory was already theirs, but what they did not understand was that they had only surrounded an empty shell. The humans were no longer there. In another corner of the galaxy, far beyond the borders of the Coalition, a new light was rising. It came from the vast human fleet that had escaped through the horizon gates. Thousands of ships of every size drifted through a quiet stretch of space untouched by any known species. The people on those ships looked back toward the faint glow of their old sun and whispered farewells before turning their eyes forward. Ethan Ward stood on the bridge of a large vessel called the TSS Aurora. The ship was one of the first colony flagships, built with technology so advanced that even he did not fully understand all of it. Around him, the crew worked in silence. They had left Earth only hours ago, but it already felt like a lifetime. Ethan's face was calm, though his heart was heavy. He had commanded armies and led soldiers into war, but this was different. This was the beginning of something new. Humanity had left its home forever, and no one knew what waited ahead. Dr. Natalie Brooks stood at a console nearby, watching the readings from the Horizon Network. She was tired, but her eyes were bright. Years of work and secrecy had finally paid off. The Horizon gates had worked perfectly, transferring millions of people and entire cities across light years in a matter of seconds. Now they were in a new region of space beyond the galactic rim, where even the Coalition's most advanced sensors could not reach. It was a place without maps or names. She turned to Ethan and said softly that the last of the colonies had made it through. He nodded and told her that the fleet would begin to move once the smaller ships finished formation. Outside the viewport, the new stars glittered like a promise. The colonists aboard the ships stared at them with wonder. Many had never seen open space before. Some wept quietly while others whispered prayers or spoke of the families they left behind. Ethan listened to the quiet hum of the engines and the soft voices around him. It felt strange that peace could exist after so much fear, but deep down he knew this peace would not last. The Coalition would not rest once they discovered what had happened. They would come searching. They always did. Far away, back in the old galaxy, Admiral Kareth's fleets were still scanning the empty Earth. They had sent drones, landing teams, and probes, but found nothing. The entire planet was silent. Even the wildlife seemed gone. The Admiral could not understand how billions of people had disappeared without leaving a single trace. His scientists spoke of teleportation and energy anomalies, but he dismissed them as nonsense. Yet every piece of evidence pointed to one thing. The humans had done something the galaxy had never seen before. They had escaped beyond space itself. Kareth called a meeting with the other fleet commanders through holographic transmission. The council chamber aboard his flagship filled with flickering images of alien leaders from different species. They argued, shouted, and accused one another of letting the humans slip away. Some demanded to bombard the planet until nothing was left. Others wanted to study it. Kareth stayed silent for a long moment before speaking. He said that destroying the planet would gain them nothing. If the humans had truly gone beyond their reach, then Earth was now meaningless. But he warned them all that humanity would not vanish quietly. He had fought them for decades and knew their nature. Wherever they had gone, they would build again, stronger than before. Meanwhile, in the new human sector, life began to settle slowly. The first colonies were established on habitable worlds. Ships carried supplies between planets, building cities that looked like reflections of the old Earth. People began to feel hope again. Children were born under alien skies. The pain of loss began to fade as the dream of a new beginning took hold. Ethan spent his days visiting the colonies, ensuring that they had what they needed. Natalie continued her work on the Horizon technology, improving it so the network could expand even farther. Together they dreamed of a human civilization that no one could ever threaten again. One evening aboard the Aurora, Ethan and Natalie stood watching the distant horizon from the observation deck. The light from a nearby nebula painted the sky in shades of blue and gold. She asked him if he thought they would ever return to the old galaxy. He shook his head slowly and said that there was nothing left to return to. They had outgrown it. Humanity was not meant to be trapped in one place. She smiled faintly and agreed. For a moment they stood in silence, listening to the faint hum of the ship. Then an alert flashed across the console beside them. A sensor had detected movement near the edge of their new territory. The crew quickly gathered around as data scrolled across the screen. It was not a coalition ship. The readings were different, unknown. The signal was faint but steady. Ethan frowned. Natalie looked over the data and said it might be an automated probe. But how could there be something this far beyond known space? Ethan ordered a small scout ship to investigate. Hours later, the scout transmitted its findings. It had found a derelict alien vessel drifting in the dark, older than any known record. Its design matched nothing in Coalition archives. It was from a civilization far older, long vanished. Humanity had escaped their enemies only to stumble into another mystery. Natalie began analyzing the data from the probe, her mind racing. The ancient ship carried strange symbols carved into its hull. The language was unknown, but something about it felt familiar. Ethan looked at the image and said quietly that maybe they were not the first to reach beyond the galaxy. The thought hung in the air like a shadow. Humanity had always believed it was alone among the stars except for the Coalition. But perhaps there had been others before them who had disappeared just as they had. Back in the old galaxy, Kareth's fears grew as his scouts reported strange incidents along the rim. Outposts were going silent. Merchant fleets had vanished. Wreckage of alien ships floated in deep space with no signs of battle. Every clue pointed toward something moving in the dark. Some whispered that it was the humans returning, but Kareth knew it could not be so soon. Still, he could not sleep. Each night he stood at the viewport, staring into the void and wondering if he had made a mistake. Perhaps letting humanity go had unleashed something far worse. In the human colonies, life went on. The cities grew brighter, the ships faster, the people stronger. Children were taught about Earth as a story from long ago, a place of beginnings. They no longer feared the Coalition. They believed that nothing could reach them now. But Natalie could not shake the feeling that something was coming. The discovery of the ancient ship had stirred questions she could not answer. Who built it? What happened to them? And most of all, what did it mean for the future of humanity? As she looked out at the stars, she felt both wonder and unease. They had left the old galaxy to find freedom, but perhaps they had also crossed into a place where even greater powers once walked. Ethan visited the colony of New Haven, where families were building homes along wide crystal lakes. He watched children play and felt peace for the first time in years. But when he looked at the night sky, he saw a strange red light pulsing at the edge of space. It was faint but constant. He turned to his aide and asked for a report. The aide said it had appeared only recently and no one knew what caused it. Ethan watched the light and thought of Kareth's fleets and the world they had left behind. He wondered if the past was truly gone or if it was only waiting to catch up. The new colonies had started to grow stronger. Fields stretched across alien soil, cities rose near rivers of shining blue water, and ships filled the skies like birds in migration. Humanity had made a new home among the stars beyond the galaxy they once called their own. Ethan Ward stood on the balcony of the Central Command Building in New Haven, watching construction drones assemble new towers in the distance. He felt proud but uneasy. Every night the same red light burned at the edge of the sky, steady and cold. It had appeared months ago and had not moved once. Scientists said it was a distant star, maybe a pulsar, but Ethan was not sure. It did not feel like a star. It felt like a warning. Dr. Natalie Brooks spent her days studying data from deep space probes. Since the discovery of the ancient derelict ship, her team had been obsessed with uncovering its origins. The symbols on its hull were now partially translated. They spoke of a people who called themselves the Lumari. They had lived millions of years ago, far beyond the edge of any known civilization. Their writings spoke of great expansion, endless progress, and finally silence. No one knew what had destroyed them. Natalie often found herself staring at the translated texts and wondering if humanity would one day share the same fate. One evening, while Ethan was meeting with the Colony Council, Natalie entered the room with urgent news. A deep space probe had gone missing. It had been exploring the area near the red light when all signals were lost. There was no sign of damage or malfunction. It had simply vanished. The council members began to argue, some demanding to send warships while others said to leave it alone. Ethan listened quietly before deciding that they needed to know the truth. He ordered a small task force to investigate. Natalie volunteered to go with them. She said it was her responsibility since the probe was part of her research. Ethan tried to stop her, but she insisted. In the end, he agreed, knowing she would never stay behind. The ship assigned for the mission was the TSS Horizon Spear, a fast and well-armed explorer built for long-range travel. Its crew was young and nervous, but determined. As it left orbit, Ethan watched from the surface, feeling a heavy weight in his chest. He trusted Natalie more than anyone, but something about this mission felt wrong. The red light pulsed faintly in the sky as if watching them go. The Horizon Spear traveled for days through silent space. The stars grew thinner and the light ahead grew brighter. When they reached the coordinates of the missing probe, there was nothing but darkness. No debris, no signal, nothing. Then the sensors detected a faint energy pattern. It was weak but steady, coming from beyond a small field of asteroids. Captain Lewis, the ship's commander, ordered them to move closer. As they did, the stars around them began to distort. The ship's lights flickered and the crew felt a strange vibration through the hull. Natalie stared at the readings in disbelief. The space around them was bending like liquid. Before anyone could react, the Horizon Spear was pulled forward and vanished. Back on New Haven, hours passed with no contact. Ethan paced the command room, demanding updates. The communication officers tried every frequency but got only static. Natalie's last transmission had been a few words. "It's not a star." Then silence. Ethan stood staring at the screen for a long time. He knew he could not wait forever, but he refused to believe she was gone. He ordered more ships to remain on standby but told them to hold position. He had seen too many lives lost to the unknown. Inside the strange field, the Horizon Spear emerged into darkness unlike anything they had seen before. There were no stars, no light, only a vast empty void. Then shapes began to appear, huge metallic forms drifting silently. They were ships but not like any human or alien design. Their surfaces were covered in glowing lines similar to the ones on the Lumari vessel. Natalie's heart raced. They had found something ancient. The crew moved carefully among the floating giants. Some of the ships were broken, others intact but lifeless. The sensors showed faint energy readings inside one of the largest. Captain Lewis decided to investigate. They launched small drones to scan it. The drones entered through a massive breach and sent back images of endless halls filled with machines and symbols. Natalie studied the footage and realized these ships were part of the same civilization. The Lumari had built this place. It was not just a fleet. It was a graveyard. As they explored, the energy readings grew stronger. One of the consoles on the alien ship flickered to life, reacting to their presence. Natalie approached it slowly, her hands trembling. The symbols shifted until they formed a pattern she recognized from the translations. It was a message. The console emitted a low hum and suddenly images filled the air. A projection of stars, galaxies, and finally darkness spreading like ink. A voice echoed softly through the ship. The translation system struggled but managed to produce broken words. We reached beyond. We saw the end. Beware the light that consumes. Then the image vanished and the console went dark. Natalie stared at the screen in silence. She understood. The red light was not a star. It was something left behind by whatever had destroyed the Lumari. She ordered the crew to leave immediately, but before they could, the void around them began to ripple. The massive alien ships started to move as if waking from a long sleep. Energy surged through their hulls, lighting the void in red. The Horizon Spear's engines roared as Captain Lewis tried to pull away, but the pull was too strong. The ship shuddered, alarms blaring. Natalie gripped the console and shouted to reroute all power to propulsion. Slowly, painfully, the ship broke free from the gravitational field. As it did, a blinding light filled the viewport and then everything went white. Hours later, the Horizon Spear reappeared near the edge of the human colonies. The crew was shaken but alive. The ship's hull was scarred and its systems were unstable, but they had escaped. Natalie immediately sent a transmission to New Haven. When Ethan received her signal, relief flooded his face. She spoke quickly, her voice firm. She told him that the red light was not natural, and that it was connected to the extinction of the Lumari. Whatever it was waking up. Ethan listened in silence. He did not interrupt. When she finished, he said they would prepare. Humanity had survived everything before, and they would survive this too. In the following weeks, the colonies began to fortify. Engineers built new defense stations while scientists studied the data Natalie had brought back. The red light was growing stronger, and now even the naked eye could see it pulsing in a slow rhythm. Some called it a beacon, others a warning. Ethan spent long nights staring at the sky, thinking of Earth, of the Coalition, of the strange and endless road humanity had chosen. They had escaped one trap only to find another waiting in the dark. Natalie continued her research in secret. She believed the Lumari had created the light as a weapon that turned against them. If she could understand it, maybe she could stop it. But the more she studied, the more she realized how far beyond human knowledge it was. The energy signatures did not match any known law of physics. It was as if reality itself was bending. One night she recorded her thoughts and said quietly that maybe humanity had reached too far. But then she smiled and said that reaching too far was what humans had always done. Ethan watched over the colonies, preparing them for what was coming. He did not know what form it would take, but he could feel it drawing closer with each passing day. The red light no longer seemed distant. It was growing brighter, spreading like dawn. He knew the Coalition would one day learn that humanity was still alive and far beyond their reach. But now for the first time he wondered if there was something even the galaxy feared more than humans. The red light that had once seemed so distant was now visible from every world in the human colonies. It grew brighter each day like a burning wound in the night sky. People had stopped calling it a star. Now they called it the Eye. It pulsed slowly with a deep rhythm that no one could explain. Scientists said it was impossible for light to move that way, but they had no other words for what they saw. To some it was a threat, to others a sign. To Ethan Ward it was both. He stood outside the Central Command building and watched the glowing red shimmer on the horizon. He knew it meant something was coming. Natalie Brooks had not slept for days. Her research had reached a breaking point. She had gathered all data from the Horizon Spear and the probes that followed. The readings were clear now. The light was not energy from a star or a weapon. It was something alive, or maybe something between life and machine. The records of the Lumari spoke of a being they called the Devourer of Suns. They had awakened it when they tried to use their own power to reach beyond the galaxy. It consumed them and then fell asleep waiting for another mind to find it. Natalie feared humanity had done just that. She sat in her lab surrounded by screens filled with endless symbols and patterns. The more she learned, the more she understood that the light was looking back at them. Ethan had gathered the Council of Colonies in a great hall on New Haven. The faces on the screens showed leaders from every world. They were afraid. Ships near the edge of their territory had gone missing. Entire patrols vanished without a signal. He told them that the time for fear was over. Humanity had escaped the coalition by being bold and united. They would do the same now. He ordered every ship to prepare for defense. He told the engineers to activate all horizon gates to form a network strong enough to move entire fleets if needed. He knew it was risky, but he would not let the colonies fall. The people needed hope and purpose more than explanations. In the days that followed, the air across every world changed. The night seemed darker, the air heavier. Children stopped playing outdoors. Farmers said their crops grew slower, as if the soil itself had become afraid. The red glow above grew stronger until it cast shadows even at midnight. Ethan visited the research station where Natalie worked. He found her staring at a simulation of the light spreading across a map of stars. He asked her what it wanted. She said she did not know, but she could feel it trying to reach them through the horizon network. Each time they used the gates to travel or communicate, it grew stronger. It was feeding on their technology. She said they could shut down the gates, but that would cut off all colonies from each other. He said they could survive isolation. She said maybe, but not for long. That night, a strange storm swept through the skies of New Haven. The air burned red and lightning cracked without thunder. Ships in orbit lost contact for hours. When communication returned, one of the outposts near the frontier was gone. There was no explosion, no debris, only silence. Natalie reviewed the sensor data and saw something that made her blood run cold. A shape had appeared in the void before the outpost vanished. It was massive beyond comprehension, larger than a planet but with no clear form. It shimmered like glass underwater. The readings showed energy levels higher than any known source. The eye had opened. Ethan ordered all ships to regroup around New Haven. Civilian transports began to evacuate the outer colonies. The skies filled with streaks of light as engines flared. The colonies had not seen this much movement since the exodus from Earth. People whispered prayers as they packed what they could. Natalie worked around the clock to find a way to stop the red light. She believed the answer was hidden in the Lumari ruins they had discovered. The message they found there had mentioned a key, a device that could close the eye forever. She thought it might still exist somewhere in the ancient wrecks drifting beyond their space. Ethan gave her his word that he would find it. A fleet of warships led by Ethan left for the void. They traveled for days through cold, empty space until they reached the place where the Horizon Spear had once found the Lumari graveyard. The wrecks were still there, floating in silence. The moment they arrived, the sensors began to fail. The air on the ships felt heavy and cold. Ethan ordered his crew to keep distance while Natalie and a small team went aboard one of the derelicts. Inside the ship, the air was still and filled with faint red light. They moved through endless corridors covered in symbols. Natalie followed the readings to a chamber deep inside. In the center stood a device unlike anything she had seen. It was a sphere of black metal covered in cracks of faint light. It pulsed once slowly like a heartbeat. She knew this was the key. As she approached the sphere, her wrist console flickered. The lights around them dimmed. A voice filled the chamber, not through speakers but inside their minds. It spoke in broken fragments, the same voice from the message they had heard before. It said, "Beware the hunger." It said, "The light feeds on creation." Natalie reached out and touched the sphere. In that instant, visions filled her head. She saw stars collapsing, galaxies fading, and the red light spreading like fire through the void. She saw the Lumari fleeing and then falling silent. When the vision ended, she was on her knees, trembling. She said they could still stop it, but time was running out. They brought the sphere aboard their ship and began the journey back. But the moment they entered, normal space alarms sounded. The red light appeared ahead of them, brighter than ever. It was not a point in the distance anymore. It was a wall of fire stretching across the stars. The crew stared in silence as the light moved like a living ocean. Ethan ordered all engines to full power. The fleet turned and fled, but the light was faster. Ships began to vanish one by one, swallowed without sound. Natalie held the sphere in her hands and whispered calculations to herself. She said the key was not meant to destroy the light, but to seal it. They had to activate it at the center where the first horizon gate had been built on Earth's remains. Ethan did not hesitate. He ordered the fleet to change course and head for the old galaxy. They would return to the ruins of their home one last time. The journey would take everything they had, but there was no other choice. As they entered the final gate, Natalie stood beside him and said quietly that if they failed, there would be nothing left to remember. He nodded and told her that humanity had faced extinction before and survived. As the fleet vanished into the gate, the red light followed like a rising tide. The stars behind them flickered and went dark. The war for survival had begun again, But this time it was not against an empire or an army. It was against the hunger of the universe itself. The fleet emerged from the horizon gate above the ruins of old Earth. The planet was quiet and lifeless, oceans still, cities dark, and the air heavy with the memory of billions who had once lived there. Ethan Ward stood on the bridge of the lead ship and looked down at the home that had been humanity's cradle. It was strange to return to a place they had left behind so long ago. Natalie Brooks stood beside him holding the sphere they had recovered from the Lumari ship. She could feel the faint pulse of energy within it. It was alive in a way, responding to the red light that had chased them across the galaxy. They had to activate it here at the center of the Horizon network or everything would be lost. Ships from the fleet moved into formation around the planet. Engineers and scientists worked quickly to reactivate the old Horizon gate at the site of its original construction. The air was tense as they powered up the gate. Energy surged like a river, crackling across the surface and into the sky. Natalie placed the sphere at the central console. Its pulse matched the frequency of the red light. It was as if it recognized its counterpart in the void. The reading spiked and then settled into a pattern. The pulse of the red eye slowed like it had noticed the change. Ethan stood at the window and watched the stars above. The red light was still there, a massive wave stretching across the galaxy, but now it hesitated. It pulsed once, twice, and seemed to pause, unsure of the energy they had unleashed. Natalie began adjusting the controls, her hands steady despite the fear that had filled her chest for days. She whispered instructions to the engineers who followed her every move. The sphere's light grew stronger, brighter, until it formed a bridge of energy connecting the planet to the pulse in the void. It was as if they were reaching out and touching the eye itself. Suddenly the red light flared violently. The fleet shook as waves of energy pushed against every ship. The command center alarms rang. Crew members clung to consoles and rails. Ethan gritted his teeth and held his position. Natalie's voice was calm, directing the energy from the sphere into the Horizon gate. The pulse of the red eye struggled against them but could not break free. It was feeding, but the sphere was closing the flow. The red light screamed in silence, stretching and bending like liquid fire. Outside, the stars flickered. Ships in orbit seemed to vanish under the intensity of the light. But the fleet held steady, each vessel connected to the others through energy links in the ancient network. Natalie's fingers flew across the controls, inputting codes and activating channels that even she had only partially understood. Ethan stood beside her, giving orders to keep the fleet aligned. He could feel the weight of every life aboard these ships pressing on him. Every colony depended on them now. After hours that felt like centuries, the red light began to shrink. Slowly, it contracted toward the center of the horizon, drawn into the sphere like a tide being pulled back to its source. The walls of space seemed to stabilize. Stars returned to their normal positions and the fleet stopped trembling. The red light pulsed one last time, a warning or perhaps a recognition, and then it vanished. Silence filled the void. The sphere sat in Natalie's hands, calm now as if exhausted. The horizon gate hummed steadily, the energy returning to normal. The fleet slowly lowered into orbit around Earth. Ethan looked down at the planet, seeing it as both home and tomb. They had succeeded. The red eye was gone, at least for now. Humanity had faced extinction once again and survived. Natalie turned to him and whispered that the Lumari might not be gone forever, but for now the threat was sealed. Ethan nodded and allowed himself a brief moment of relief. Messages began to stream across the colonies. Ships reported sightings of stars and systems they had never explored. People cheered as news spread that the red light had disappeared. Across the colonies, communities celebrated quietly. Life would continue. Children played under alien skies once more. Farmers returned to their fields. Engineers and scientists repaired the damage and strengthened the defenses. Humanity had won a fight against something older and more powerful than any army. And they had survived not by fighting but by reaching further, thinking faster and staying united. Ethan walked through the command center later that evening watching his officers. He saw young men and women working tirelessly, determined to protect the new human civilization. He smiled faintly, remembering Earth and how far they had come. Natalie stayed at her console, eyes on the readings, already planning how to prevent future threats. She understood the danger had not ended, only been postponed. Ethan knew that humanity would never stop exploring, never stop reaching, and never stop surviving. In the following months, the colonies expanded. The horizon gates were fully operational, allowing travel between worlds in hours instead of years. Knowledge from the Lumari ships was integrated into human technology. Ships became faster, cities more self-sufficient, and communication networks more secure. Humanity was stronger than before. Ethan and Natalie oversaw these changes quietly, ensuring that every world remained connected and every citizen safe. Far beyond, in the void where the red light had once stretched, the galaxy returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after the hunger had almost touched humanity. For now, the human race was beyond danger. Their reach extended beyond the Coalition, beyond the old galaxies, and beyond anything the universe had seen before. Earth remained a memory, a symbol of beginnings and lessons learned. Humanity had survived and thrived. They had faced the infinite and come through intact. Ethan stood once more at the observation deck, staring at the stars. Natalie joined him, the sphere now safely stored in a chamber that would protect it for generations. He asked if she thought there were other threats like the Red Eye waiting in the galaxy. She shook her head slightly, saying that they could not know everything, but humanity would meet each challenge as it always had. Ethan smiled faintly, the weight of the past heavy on his shoulders, but hope burning in his chest. They had left Earth behind, escaped the Coalition, survived the void, and sealed the ancient hunger. Humanity was no longer bound to a single world or a single galaxy. They were free and they were strong. The fleet drifted silently above Earth as night fell across the planet. Lights flickered in distant cities, and the people below began to sleep, unaware of how close they had come to the edge of extinction. The stars above shimmered as if congratulating them on surviving. For the first time in centuries, humanity could look forward without fear. They had been tested and had passed. And in the quiet of space, the TSS Aurora and its companions sailed among the stars, guardians of a new era. Humanity had gone beyond, and now nothing could hold them back.